Fujifilm announces their new hybrid flagship, the X-T4. DPReview announces their new analog forum, and Jonas Rask as Photographer of the Week on this episode of Take's Take.
Thanks so much for tuning in for another episode of Photography Radio. My name is Tomasz, and today you are listening to Take's Take with Take Kayo, where he covers what's new and interesting in the world of photography, including digital, analog, mobile, and everything in between. Enjoy.
Can you imagine your life without photography? No? Then you will love this show. And it doesn't matter if you're a DSLR, a mirrorless, or a mobile phone shooter. We're here to help your photography grow. This is Photography Radio.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Take's Take, which is my take on photography news this week. So let's begin now. It seems 2020 is all about flagship cameras, and Fujifilm wasn't going to be left out. So they just announced their brand new flagship hybrid mirrorless camera, the new X-T4. For those of you who might not be acquainted with the term hybrid camera, it's basically a digital camera that can do both stills and video equally well. And for years, the top two camera lines has been the Panasonic GH series and the Sony A7 series. But Fujifilm challenged their market dominance back in September of 2018 by launching the now famous X-T3. For hybrid shooters, the X-T3 was groundbreaking in terms of the features it offered serious videographers as well as still shooters, but the one thing that it was missing and what the competition had already at that time was in-body image stabilization. Well, no more. The main feature of the brand new X-T4 is the addition of the older X-H1's IBIS mechanism, updated of course, and matched to Fujifilm's latest and greatest sensor and processor combination. It's important to note that the X-T3 also has this same sensor and processor combination, so the image quality itself between the X-T3 and the X-T4 will be the same between these two cameras, but the difference is, of course, again, the addition of IBIS, but as well, there's a brand new 300,000 actuation shutter mechanism with magnetic springs to dampen and quiet the entire shooting experience, as well a brand new 75% more capacity battery system, and a turbocharged firmware update that frankly does circles around the firmware of the X-T3, which again shares the exact same processor as the X-T4. So look for a upcoming future firmware update, I hope. The launch price of $1,700 of the X-T4 is well in line with the competition, regardless of the sensor size. But what differentiates these various cameras between Fujifilm, Sony, and Panasonic is the availability of accessories, which includes third-party cinematic lenses, for which Sony and Panasonic still have a much larger ecosystem of third-party support. However, many still feel, including myself, that Fujifilm has the best balance of sensor size, native lens selection, and firmware that gives equal weight to both stills and video shooters over the competition. As many of you know, I work closely with Fujifilm Canada and was given an early pre-production copy to test before launch, so I'll leave links in the show notes to my article on Fuji Love, as well as my YouTube channel on my first impressions on this camera. But if you don't want to go there, I'll just let you know my overall thoughts on the camera so far is very positive. I mentioned this in both my video and article that this camera is what the original X-H1 should have been back in 2018. Fujifilm was too anxious to release the camera, the X-H1, and decided to use the aging X Processor Pro, which was the third iteration of that processor, instead of waiting for the upcoming X Processor 4 that was eventually launched in the X-T3 just 7 months later. If Fujifilm decided to wait until September of 2018 to have launched the X-H1 at the same time as the X-T3, one with IBIS and the one without, that $400 launch price difference, the X-H1 being launched at $1,900 US back in 2018, and the $1,500 price point for the X-T3 back in September 2018, that difference would have made a lot more sense, and I believe that the X-H1 would have become the hybrid camera of choice back then, right until now. Either way, better late than never, and the X-T3 has already been an award-winning camera even without IBIS, so it's not like it was a failed camera. The X-T3 is still great. In fact, there's a decent deal on the X-T3 right now, so if IBIS isn't your thing, or you have a decent collection of stabilized lenses already, then I would seriously consider picking up an X-T3 right now while supplies last. DPReview. Do I need to introduce them? Or the full name is actually Digital Photography Review, as has been the gold standard website for all things digital photography. Today you mention a photography website, 99% of people will just assume you mean digital photography. But when DPReview.com first launched back in 1998 at the peak of analog photography, they had to distinguish themselves from every other magazine and website that was at the time mostly about film cameras and film photography. Well, 22 years later, DPReview is the establishment when it comes to all things photography, news, product reviews, and their sometimes controversial forums section. It can get brutal in there sometimes. Well, there's a new feature being added to DPReview, and that is DPReview Analogue forum. Who would have ever thought of that? However, remember that DPReview is a business, and as a business within the photographic world, they've acknowledged the popularity and resurgence of the analog photography world over the past few years, and many new, mostly young photographers are looking for resources to help them find information on new films, as well as new processes, and maybe reviews on older film cameras. Now, DPReview being one of the top 1,500 most visited websites in the world, not just photography, but just most visited websites in the world, why would DPReview completely ignore the analog photography world? It just would be bad business sense. So DPReview has announced that they will be working with Amish Gill, founder of the popular 35mmc.com website, to expand their coverage of film photography and the film photography world, beginning with their analog forum section, and then they mention that they will expand to include more film-related content. I even noticed B&H really pushing film photography hard based on some of their posts and articles on their blog section. And so seeing DPReview partnering with 35mmc.com makes a lot of sense. It's just very popular right now. And this is good news for everyone, even for us film photographers. We shouldn't be snobs about this. Like we knew that it was cool even before the mainstream caught on. Film photographers around the world should celebrate the fact that the largest photography website in the world has now decided to invest in the analog photography world, which will lead to more interest, and with DPReview's powerful influence over the entire photographic industry, perhaps bring back discontinued films, and maybe even bring back some film cameras that have already been discontinued. Like, how about a brand new Fujifilm TX1, or also known as the Hasselblad X-Pan, or how about a brand new Contax T3, or even bring back my favorite Leica M7. Why was that discontinued? So congratulations to Amish Gill and 35mmc.com for this collaboration, and look forward to seeing new analog photography content coming our way. For this week, I thought I would pick Jonas Rask as Photographer of the Week. Many of you may know Jonas as one of the famous Fujifilm X photographers, and yes, his work is very well known to all of us in the Fujifilm ecosystem. Well, first of all, he shoots most of the product images for Fujifilm for all their launch events, so he has early access to all the cameras. Yes, I am very jealous. But more than that, Jonas is a very talented photographer. Not every photographer has the ability and the skill sets to be able to shoot product shots, as he does very well for Fujifilm, but as well as really interesting street photography, portraiture work, and wedding photography. And much like me, Jonas is also a very avid film photographer. He has a nice collection of film cameras, including his very unique Fujifilm TX1, which I struggled saying because TX1, X-T1, very similar, but is also known as the Hasselblad X-Pan, which was really relabeled for the Western world, but really it is originally the Fujifilm TX1. Now, one other thing about Jonas that makes him quite unique is that he considers himself an enthusiast photographer. And why is that? Well, because he doesn't make a living as a photographer. So what's his day job then? Well, he's a medical doctor, a general practitioner, a GP. So what an interesting guy. Photographer, product photographer, wedding photographer, and a medical doctor. So I'll leave links in the show notes to see some of his work, including links to his website, his Instagram account, as well as a couple of interesting YouTube videos. So thanks again for joining me for episode number 9 for 2020 on Take's Take, which is my take on photography news this week. I'd also love to hear from you. Leave me a message at photographyradio.com/take, which is spelled take, but not pronounced that way. So again, that is photographyradio.com/take. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll talk to you all next week. And until then, happy shooting.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Hit subscribe on your podcast app. It would mean a lot for us to have you as our regular listener. Head over to photographyradio.com to drop your suggestion for future editions of Photography Radio or simply to say hello. We would absolutely love to hear from you. In the meantime, have a wonderful night and we will be back with more photography in your ears very soon.